Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast, Anxietea, a mental health podcast, where I give you mental health stories, self-care tips and techniques, and whatever you all want me to discuss. As a reminder and disclaimer that I'm not a mental health professional, just a mental health advocate getting through life one day at a time. Here is also the warning that there may be sensitive topics discussed within this podcast, so feel free to leave if this does not sound like the podcast for you. So, without further ado, welcome to episode 11. Let's grab our tea, take a sip in of some self-love, and exhale the stresses of life. Today, I am drinking sweet tea, and for today's podcast, I am going to interview Kay Will to discuss how to help those with depressive episodes. So for the first question, when a loved one is having a depressive episode, what do you do?
I try to not get too invasive with asking them what's wrong because a lot of people that have depressive episodes have them triggered by nothing that really sticks out in particular. So it's not so much asking them like, hey, why are you sad about whatever is going on in your day? It's more just trying to be there and be supportive and acknowledge that you may not understand the causes of it.
Yeah, so how can you tell when they are having a depressive episode?
So my mom struggles with depressive episodes a lot, and oftentimes how I know she's in a depressive episode is there's changes in her behavior, such as talking less, getting more irritable when things bother her, or drinking more than she usually does.
Yeah, and as somebody that does not have depression, such as myself, I know that you do, but um, for somebody like me, it is always good to know the symptoms of a depressive episode and what to look for and how to help those, because I do have a lot of friends that have depression clinically, and there are people, of course, everybody gets certain depressive episodes, but for those with clinical depression, it is a little bit different. So, how do you know what will work and how to help those loved ones?
The thing is, you have to deal with being a little bit uncomfortable because you really don't know what will work. It's just a matter of trying different skills. Like I've not been trained professionally in any type of therapy, but I've attended different therapies for DBT and CBT, which are dialectical behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. So oftentimes things that I try include my different skills that I've learned through those therapies.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for people and outsiders to know those certain skills, and they should be more well known within society, because a lot of the times there is still that stigma, especially against depression, and they will just think that people within those having those depressive episodes they'll just think that they are lazy or apply some negative connotation to their situation rather than actually helping them. So, what do you do if nothing is working?
If nothing is working, I try to just stay there with my mom, assuming that she's the one that's having the depressive episode. I live with her most of the time, so it's pretty easy to just be there physically for her, even if I am not able to find a skill that's working or any way to comfort her.
Yeah.
Safety is an issue with depression, so I feel like it's important that if someone's having a depressive episode and they have a tendency of self-destructive or self-injurious behavior, that it's really important to help the person stay physically safe because that's not always possible to do alone in a depressive episode.
Yeah, and in those instances where you live with the person or really know the person, it might be easier to think of techniques and ways to help them through communication and just through getting to know the person and what works well with them, especially if that person is your mom, because it's kind of a stronger bond and connection because you've known that person your whole life. How much experience have you had with those with depression?
I mean, my parents both have depression, so I've had a lifetime of experience before I even could understand what depression was or that my parents had it. It definitely impacts your life in ways because communication looks a little bit different when you're dealing with a family with depression. Um, Different behaviors look different. Like there's sometimes outbursts from irritability, which is a major symptom of depression. And yeah, I've just kind of like gotten to know the ins and outs of it through growing up in an environment where there are two adults with depression.
Yeah, and although I've never had a family member, well, I mean, I've had a family member with depression, but as far as my parents, I've never had a clinically depressed parent. So I could imagine that that would really impact your childhood and your views growing up.
Definitely.
How do you feel when a loved one starts to have a depressive episode?
Sometimes when I was younger, I used to feel scared if I noticed that my parents were depressed. I would have a fear reaction because it's just like if you don't know what's going on with them or how to help them or how to make the situation better, it can make you feel a little out of control even if you are not the one experiencing the episode firsthand. So I think that over time it's evolved from a place of fear to a place of curiosity. Now I feel more inclined to try different therapy techniques that I've learned to like try to help them. So over time it has shifted, but it definitely is something that you need to enter into open-minded when you have someone having a depressive episode because you don't always know how it's going to pan out or what's going to work or what is going to make it worse. So you really have to be patient, but keep a curious mindset when you're dealing with this.
What were your ideas on depression before witnessing someone else struggling with it?
Well, when I was really young, before I knew my parents had depression, just because they never really explained it to me until I was about 8 or 9, I thought that it was just a feeling of like loss of control or that they were just stressed about work or something. When you are not sure what's going on, it can look like a lot of other things. It can look like physical health issues or just regular bouts of stress that we all deal with, but it's definitely different.
What other disorders have you witnessed and how did you help them?
Well, my best friend Kira, the host of the show, has anxiety, as you all know. So I've helped Kira with different times when she was having anxiety attacks or even panic attacks. And things that work for those are sometimes similar to things that work for depressive episodes. And then I myself have schizoaffective disorder, as I've discussed in a prior episode of this podcast. So those episodes look different, and they still do use some of the same skills, but since those are a little bit less similar than the other two, it's um, it's just like a little bit different with helping people with those.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how similar disorders can be, even though they are completely dissimilar in certain symptoms and how it affects the person. I mean, every person is different, so even if somebody has the same diagnosed disorder as they do, it could look a little bit different and their reactions could be a little bit different. But as far as techniques of how to help people with different disorders go, it's interesting how similar they can be, such as like deep breathing can help with many different disorders for grounding and other grounding techniques. So I just think that that is pretty interesting. So, next question is, did you have any advice for those that are trying to help their loved ones who is struggling with depression, depressive episodes, or any other mental illness?
I would say the most important thing is just try to keep an open mind because a lot of times, as I've mentioned before, when you aren't sure what's going on with a loved one, it's pretty natural to like shrink back with fear or uncertainty. But instead, I would say instead of trying to pull yourself back from your loved one out of your confusion, I would try to just be really open minded and be patient with them because certain things that help them on Monday might not be helpful on the next Wednesday, or if their depressive episode was sparked by an event or an internal thought, they might have different appearances. So I would say just try to do whatever you can to help in a really open-minded way instead of getting scared or being uncertain because those are really natural things. But if you are going to try to support your loved one, you it's definitely more preferred to try to be open minded. Sorry, I just repeated myself like 3 times.
No, it's fine. I do the same thing, as you know. But I think also it is super, that is why it's super important for society to be well informed of many different mental disorders. And instead of having that natural instinctive reaction to feel scared and want to shrink away from a person that is having a bad mental health day or having some public episode, whether it's depression, anxiety, more severe episodes from more severe mental disorders, I think that, yeah, instead of having that negative reaction, that it is more important to be aware of how to help those people, especially in public settings, because having those episodes, I mean, as someone that has had a public like panic attack episode or anxiety episode, it feels scary for the person having the episode doing it in public because of how everyone kind of looks at you as someone that is scary, but instead you're mostly kind of scared of them. So, especially having that fear of nobody knowing how to help. So, I just think it's really important that people should be more aware in society. And okay, so for the last question, are there any other thoughts that you would like to share before we end our time together?
I would say, yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, I feel like they should teach CBT and DBT and ongoing self care skills in, I don't know, the public education system, I guess, because just like Shira said, when you're in public and you see somebody that's having an episode like some sort of mental health crisis, it can be really scary if you don't know what's going on. And instead, I feel like more people should be equipped to deal with these things, not only like to help people other than themselves going through things to support them, but also because there is such a high prevalence of mental health disorders. And there's some statistic that I learned in a psychopathology class through Pitt that I think it's like 52% of people will experience a depressive episode at some point in their life. So these are just really important things to have background knowledge about. And I definitely think that our public schools and colleges and universities can do more to educate people about these things, just like any other social issue.
Yeah, and it should be required. And I know we learn about CPR and first aid in high school and sometimes in college classes, but I recently took a certification course for CPR and first aid, and they talked about everything that you could think of in the book that is possible for helping somebody in public that might need some sort of first aid, even though it might not be something that you can help in terms of having something on hand. Like for those with seizures, And they've also talked about addiction, which is also really important and an important topic that should be more discussed. But they didn't talk about anything dealing with how to help people with a mental illness or a mental disorder, because that requires just as much first aid, in my opinion. Because if somebody is going to hurt themselves or not feel safe, it's important to kind of recognize those symptoms. So, as we complete our journey, I want to wish everyone luck on their own individualized journeys and hope that they can find comfort in these videos and knowing that they are not alone. Please share these videos to spread awareness and end the mental health stigma. For those of you that do watch and support my videos, thank you. It means a lot to know that someone cares about these messages, especially now in a time where we need more love and less hate towards one another. Now that we have completed our 11th journey together, let's take in a sip of some self-love and exhale the stresses of life. Thank you, and join in next time.